Hello, I'm Liz Lumley of Finextra, and today I'm speaking to Giles Nelson of Software IG. And we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about the changing environment that retail banks find themselves in right at the moment, and how they're sort of dealing with their customers with all the new players in the market and the digital revolution and all that good stuff. So, I hear a lot of banks right at the moment talk about that we are now customer centric, and we now have, we're really pushing forward on customer relationships. What does that really mean?
Well, I think that is a reflection, a true reflection of a difficulty that banks and actually other players in other industries are finding themselves in, and that is where you are, in some ways, a utility service. For most people, one bank account looks pretty much like another bank account. So what a lot of banks are trying to do at the moment is how we really differentiate our service, and we think about not just core banking services to retail customers, but what else can we do for them as well.
So what are sort of the value-added services on top of the commodity bank account?
Yeah, that's right, that's right. I mean, banks they're in this position where they have an incredible amount of very useful information about our behaviour. Possibly the most valuable information you can really imagine, apart from perhaps medical information. So what we're spending, what our salary is, a lot of very sensitive but useful information for them that they could use to provide us with actually useful services personalised for us. And this is a big part of the whole digital revolution around product positioning and delivering product to people is personalisation. This idea of a segment of one. So I don't get a product which is marketed to lots of people. I get one that's actually suitable for me. And banks are trying to think about how to do that.
I want to get in a little bit later on about how banks deal with that personalized service and maybe on a real-time basis. But I wanted to go a little bit in what you mentioned, that banks have all this access to really valuable data, transaction data, how we spend our money. But why is it sometimes very difficult for banks to sort of use that data effectively? It seems like they have all this really valuable data in their reserves, and then it's not being used to the best benefit of the customer and the best benefit of the bank. Why do you think
I
that
think
happens?
there are a couple of things there. First of all, there's a technology issue, and generally speaking, organisations are good at looking in the past, what happened previously, but actually to get a bit more intelligent about the way that you deal with your customers, you need to be able to deal with them on a continual real-time basis. So that's the first point, and we'll come on to that, I think, and discuss that a little bit more. But the other point then is the whole privacy issue around this data, because of course it is very sensitive, because it's so valuable. And banks are very cognizant of that. And I think there is we're all going through, almost as a society, around how we trade our data and who we give permission to for that data to be used to deliver us something of value to us. Because what we don't want, particularly, it's got a lot more sensitive recently with the whole NSA, GCHQ thing, is we don't want this data to be used unless it's of a benefit to us. And I think banks are in a position where they've got to tread a very fine line between and to ensure that they're using that data appropriately. Now, what we've seen is that some banks are beginning to do this. They're beginning to say to their customers, look, if we can use your data about the transactions that you're executing, some profile information about you, what we can do is deliver you some services which are going to be of benefit to you financially and enable you to get to perhaps products and services that you might not be aware of previously.
So, we live in an age where, of course, everyone's walking around with very powerful computers in their pockets, and they can access their bank details at any time. So, I mean, how important is it that banks have this sort of real-time relationship with their customers?
I think it's going to be something which all banks will do in the future, and in fact that we will expect them to do. And I think you mentioned the rise of the smartphone. the fact that now you can access these services on the move, and that raises expectations because it means that we expect to be able to access this information instantly. There's no sense of putting a request to get some information in and then waiting and getting an email the next day. We expect it all the time, and that means that actually we're more prepared to receive perhaps location-based offers delivered to us through our bank. So, for example, perhaps I've said to my bank, well, you know what, there are certain brands that I'm interested in receiving offers about. And perhaps I go into a shopping mall and I go into a particular store and execute a transaction, which the bank can see because it goes through their systems. And perhaps on that basis, they know where that is, they know what time of day it is, they might deliver to me a coupon in real time suggesting, well, do you know what, you told us that you were interested in these particular brands, and within 50 metres there's a shop that's got an offer that was 20% off as long as you use our card to do it. So what is the bank doing by doing that? They are encouraging you to use their card, first of all, to keep it top of wallet, so use their credit card rather than someone else's, otherwise you don't get the offer. And secondly, they're keeping their brand top of mind. So you're thinking, yeah, great, my bank is delivering to me these nice offers, I'm getting something from them.
Instead of the PayPal brand or the Starbucks brand.
Right, absolutely. And instead of the bank being seen as this boring utility, which is important to me, but it doesn't really do anything else for me. And it means then that at the points where perhaps I'm making significant decisions about my finances, maybe it's a mortgage, maybe it's a car loan, that my bank is going to be top of mind, and I will go to them for a quote. So it's a continual dialogue with the customer. That's what banks want to get to. And mobile technology in particular, as you said, enables them to do that. But it can't just be about serving the customer when they're putting in a request. What banks want is to have more of an interactive dialogue with them, which is where it comes in. If you're prepared to give us a bit of information and allow us to look at this as you're living your life, we will give you something back, and we'll give you access to promotions and other things which are going to be useful to you.
So I wanted to move on and talk a little bit about fraud. I mean, because banks have used data to combat fraud for a long time, but I mean, how is sort of fraud now becoming part of the front end, part of that customer experience? How are banks using that?
Well, I think we take anti-fraud measures in some ways for granted, but related to customer experience, almost the most fundamental part of it. We expect our banks to protect us.
Is it that trust thing people always talk about?
Absolutely. So, if a bank can't handle our data and spot when somebody else is doing something nefarious, then they fall at the first hurdle in terms of their use of our information and trust. So fraud's absolutely crucial. And again, being able to take a bit more of an intelligent view of what's happening and the transactions that are being executed, and a real-time view means that you can actually not just identify fraud after it's occurred, but actually prevent it as well. So some of the same technologies which actually can be used for customer experience and looking looking at the transactions that are being executed by people can also be applied to looking at those transactions and identifying fraud as well.
So, outside of banks talking to me about this customer centricity, the other huge word banks talk about is regulations and compliance. And a lot of people say that so much of that IT budget is wrapped up in dealing with regulations and compliance. So, I mean, what's left over from the IT budget and IT investment to deal with this more sort of customer-facing, innovative side of the bank? Is there, how much IT investment is needed to really improve the customer side of the business while still taking care of the requirements in the compliance and reg side?
Yes. Well, I think what I would say to that is that, of course, acknowledge that the regulation and compliance is a very important area at the moment, and I think that's got very broad support, of course, but that is a function which is almost at the opposite end from customer experience, because we as retail customers don't really see directly the benefits of that. We know that it's
the
important.
reason why I mentioned the IT investment and regulation is I'm thinking sort of the disruptive players in the banking, in the financial market that are offering customer-facing front ends that don't have to deal with this extra investment that does that put banks at a disadvantage, that they can't compete with these disruptive players that are maybe offering simpler, more efficient customer-facing pricing systems? Where a bank has a little bit more responsibility from their IT budget.
Yes, so I think that is a danger. I think a bank, because of the very regulated environment they're in, it's more difficult for it to move within the market. It's more difficult culturally, perhaps, to launch new services, and thus they know, any bank knows that it's vulnerable to some of the IT disruption that has changed other markets and really disrupted them. Now, is there any such disruption on the horizon? I don't quite see it yet, even with things like PayPal, Google Wallet, Bitcoin, and so on and so forth. I don't see it quite happening yet, but banks have got to be careful about this. Now, when it comes to budgets and IT budgets, yes, there's a lot around regulation and compliance. But actually, what we're seeing is that when it comes to customer experience, that's not really being led by IT. IT, of course, are very important in delivering that. But actually, budget for that is coming from the chief marketing officer. And they're saying, right, these are our requirements. We need to get closer to our customers. We need to do this real-time, ongoing dialogue with them. And we need your help, IT. But it's marketing that are driving that.
That's interesting. Well, I think we could probably go on for about an hour talking about this topic, but I wanted to thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.